something shifted in the atmosphere last night. And I don't mean some tiny blip. The models that basically run every forecast in this country went to sleep showing hot, stubborn, late summer weather that just wouldn't quit. And they woke up showing something else entirely. Not a tweak, not a small adjustment. The whole upper-level pattern rearranged itself overnight. A massive blocking ridge is locking into place from the coast of Alaska all the way to Greenland, and it's reaching down to grab the middle of the United States by the collar. If you've been sweating through nights that never cool off, if you've been staring at your thermostat wondering when this heat finally breaks, stick with me, because the answer is closer than you've been told. Arriving faster than almost anyone expected. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, because over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through exactly what's coming when it hits your part of the country and the twist most people will totally miss. This is the forecast that changed overnight, and by the end, you'll understand it better than folks who only skim headlines. Here's what you need to know. First, this isn't some weak, cool front that fizzles by Tuesday. The signals forecasters watch, the ones that tell us real change is coming, are all lighting up at the same time. And that hardly ever happens. When you see that alignment, you stop and pay attention, and there's something else, something hidden that's going to split this country down the middle. One side of America is about to get the relief they've been begging for. The other side is about to get hit with something much worse. And the difference between those two? It comes down to where you live. So before you get fired up about this cooldown, you need to know which side of that line you're on. Let me start with what matters most to you. Then I'll show you how it all works, because the how is just as interesting. Up at the top of the hemisphere, where the jet stream tears across like a river of wind, something is locking into place. A blocking pattern sounds exactly like what it is normally. That current just rips west to east, dragging storms along and keeping everything moving. But now and then, a giant dome of high pressure plants itself and just sits there. Like a boulder drops straight into the middle of a river. Wind can't push through, so it buckles. It bends into these massive loops, and stuck inside those loops, Arctic air that should stay locked up north slips right out the back door and heads south. Here's the kicker though. We're getting two of these boulders at the same time, one near Alaska, one near Greenland. Drop a boulder on both ends of the continent at once, and that cold air gets trapped right in the middle with nowhere to go but straight down into the heart of North America. That's the engine. That's what flipped the forecast models upside down overnight. And this part should grab your attention. A double block setup like this is rare. When it fires off in late August, it doesn't just shave a few degrees off the afternoon high, it rewrites the entire week. Here's where the forecast gets real. Nobody in this business just wakes up one morning and feels something in their bones. We watch numbers. Think of them like vital signs for the atmosphere. And right now, several of them are screaming the same thing at the same time. That's when you stop calling it a blip. That's when you know the models didn't just have a bad dream. First up, the North Atlantic Oscillation. The name sounds like a textbook chapter, but it's just a way to measure pressure over the Atlantic, near Greenland. When that number drops negative, high pressure builds over Greenland, basically a brick wall for the jet stream. This is going to push the jet stream way south, and then it drives cold air into the eastern half of the country. That's the first sign that something bigger is going on here, not just a one-day dip. Next, the East Pacific Oscillation. This one's all about what's happening near Alaska. When it goes negative, there's a huge ridge of high pressure that balloons over Alaska. And here's the part that made forecasters do a double take. Both of these signals are turning negative at nearly the same time, in the same window, feeding off each other. Negative near Alaska. That's a block on the west side. Negative near Greenland. That's a block on the east. Put those together, and the cold air trapped in the middle has nowhere to go but down, straight into the heart of North America. Sit with that for a second. Because this is the difference between you and someone who just reads a headline and keeps scrolling. Most folks look at a cold front on their weather app and barely react. They have no clue what's actually happening behind the scenes. Two massive pressure systems on opposite sides of the continent, working together like a giant set of hands, shoving cold air southward. That's the machinery. That's the how behind the what. And honestly, covering these patterns for as long as I have, I've learned something. When two signals align like this, it's almost never a coincidence, and there's usually something bigger pulling the strings. The real question now is whether they hold together long enough to deliver the punch that's being advertised. And that, my friends, is where things get genuinely interesting. All right, let's be real for a second here. If you've ever watched weather coverage, you already know the vibe, right? Forecaster walks up, points at the big screen, super confident, like they've got everything all figured out. But honestly, behind all that confidence, there's a real battle going on. And right now, the two biggest computer models meteorologists use are looking at the exact same pattern and seeing two completely different stories. So which one's got it right? That's the million-dollar question. Here's the deal. The American model, the GFS, is seeing this block build fast and hard. I'm talking a massive wall of high pressure locking in, shoving cold air straight down the middle of the country, like a freight train with zero brakes. It's aggressive. It's deep. We're talking 20-degree temperature anomalies plunging all the way down to the Gulf Coast. That's the kind of cold that makes you double-check your jacket. Now, the European model, the ECMWF, which has historically been a more reliable one, looks at the exact same data and says, whoa, hold on now. Yeah, it sees the block forming. Yeah, it agrees cooler air is heading south. But it keeps that cold air way more contained. Think firm hand, not a punch. Temps drop across the North Shore, But that Arctic air doesn't take the same dramatic nosedive toward the deep south. So it's not like one says cold and the other says warm. Both say cooler. But the difference is in the depth, and that makes all the difference. And that gap between them, that is the single biggest uncertainty in this entire forecast. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter because it decides everything for tens of millions of people. Let me break that down for you. If the American model wins this fight, places like Arkansas, Tennessee, even northern Mississippi and Alabama could wake up to morning temps they haven't felt in months. We're talking midwinter chill in places where folks are still sweating through their shirts. But if the Europeans got it right, that relief drops anchor somewhere around the Ohio River. And the South stays stuck in the heat while the North gets the cold front party. That's not a little wobble. That's a fork in the road. And these two models are actively at war over which path we take. But, and I promised I'd be honest with you, there's a real disagreement happening between the models right now. The two heavyweight systems meteorologists lean on most are the European model and the American model. Think of them as two extremely experienced navigators looking at the same storm on the horizon. Most of the time, they agree on the big picture. And right now, they both agree a block is coming and cooler air is heading south. But they disagree on how strong that block gets and how far south the cold reaches. The American model leans toward a deeper, stronger block, which would send colder air plunging much farther down the map. The European sees the same shift but keeps it more restrained. Cooler in the north, yes, but not diving as dramatically toward the south. That gap between them is the single biggest uncertainty in this forecast, and it decides something real. Whether you get a refreshing break or a genuinely cold snap, whether you're closing the windows at night or reaching for a second blanket. For the northern states, it's not a question of if you get cooler air, it's how deep and how long. But for the southern half of the country, that debate takes on a much more serious tone. Because the same pattern bringing relief to the north is doing something else entirely down south. And that's where this forecast gets really interesting. I'll get to that in a moment. It's the twist most headlines are completely missing. All right, let's be real for a second. Most people are going to scroll right past this forecast, see something like cooler air for the Midwest, and just keep it moving. And honestly, I get it. Cooler air sounds nice. But here's the thing. They're missing the bigger story. Because while you're up in the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, digging through drawers for a hoodie you haven't touched since June, the exact same weather pattern giving you that break is about to do something brutally different to the southern half of the country. I call this the seesaw effect. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember this. When you push one side of a seesaw down, the other side goes up. There's no middle ground. The atmosphere works as one connected system. So when that trough digs deep over the middle of the country, when cold air plunges straight down from Canada through the plains and into the Ohio Valley, that air doesn't just vanish. Air has mass, it has momentum, it shoves everything in its path. And what's in its path is that thick, warm, tropical air that's been camped out over the southern U.S. like a lid on a boiling pot. That air gets pushed south, but it doesn't just slip away quietly. It stacks up, it compresses, and when air compresses and stacks, so here's what I really want to ask you, and I want you to drop it in the comments below. Which model do you trust, American or European? Because people who follow this stuff closely, oh man, do they have strong opinions. I want to know where you stand. Do you buy the deeper, colder plunge, or are you leaning the more restrained route? I read every single comment, and I will come back to this exact question as we get closer to the 25th, because the answer is going to reveal itself in real time. So drop your take below. I'll be watching. Look, let's cut through the noise and talk about what actually matters for your week. You've probably felt that first cool push moving through parts of the country recently. And honestly, it feels amazing. No argument there. But here's the trap so many people fall into. That first cool shot, it's just the appetizer. The main event hasn't even shown up yet. It's still loading. Here's what's really going on behind the scenes. Every single day, the heat tries to rebuild right behind that cool push. So you wake up to a crisp morning, crack the window open, think finally some relief. And then by mid-afternoon, the temperature climbs right back up. Frustrating. Right up north, highs are dropping into the 70s after weeks of baking in the 90s. So that's a genuine break. But it comes and goes. The pattern isn't locked in yet. Think of it like a wave pulling back before it breaks. That's exactly where we are right now. The real turn, the one this entire forecast hinges on, arrives as we push toward the 25th and 26th. That's when the block matures. High pressure anchors itself near Alaska and Greenland. And the jet stream carves a deep trough down into the middle of the country. When that happens, a substantial cold front comes barreling south. And this one, not the appetizer. This is the main course. This is the wave 5 for the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and the Northeast. We're talking temperatures 10 to 15 degrees below average. And in the core of the coldest air, where that buckled jet stream dips deepest, potentially 20 degrees below average. Let that sink in for a second. 20 degrees below normal in the final days of August, that's not a cool front anymore. That's the kind of anomaly that makes people dig for a hoodie they haven't touched since. May overnight lows in the coldest pockets could tumble into the 50s. And if the American model's deeper solution wins out, some spots could even flirt with the 40s. Picture that. Your city, your neighborhood in the 40s at night in August. A month known for sweat-soaked sheets and air conditioners running full blast. That's a wild thought, right? Now, here's what I want you to notice about the timing. When does summer heat usually break where you live? For most of the northern half of the country, It's a slow, gradual slide. A few degrees lost each week, a cooler night here and there, nothing dramatic. This is not that. This is a door slamming shut. The models that guide every forecast didn't edge toward this gradually, they flipped overnight. And when a pattern this large sets up this fast, it tends to stick. That's a big reason forecasters are paying attention, and it's why you should too.